Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back. Sandy Bottom Homestead. And I don't think you can hear me. Can you guys hear me? Let's see here. If you can hear me, thumbs up. Oh, you can hear me? Okay, good. I don't see the little deal. Does it sound better than normal? I'm just asking because we're embarking on a new project and we want to see how it goes, how it's going to sound. While I wait for that. Okay, good. Greenhouse heat. So how's everybody doing today? Sparrow says very clear. Hey, Dave. Hey, Sparrow. Thank you for showing up, being part of the crew. I believe we're talking about what's it called? Greenhouse heating. And so I wanted to totally focus this on off-grid. Oh, so you're multitasking, Dave? I like it. I like it a lot. Greenhouse heating, and I wanted to focus off-grid because basically it's cost effective. Simple, not so much. There's nothing easier than throwing a space heater in a greenhouse and running with it. But that's not where we stand with this. So, man, there's so many places to look. So, first of all, anybody in here have a greenhouse, or are you just like interested, trying to feel it out, see if it is even worth it? Hey, Connie, thank you for coming. So, Sparrow, you do have a greenhouse? So I'm curious because it's important, even if you don't have one and you're considering it, that you take all of this into account. So there's a lot to heating a greenhouse, but what there really is there's expectations to heating a greenhouse that we need to be aware of. And I talk about this a lot, and I'm not going to stop because it's so important. But before you even embark on this, you need to come up with two things. One, are you going to have electricity? And two, how warm do you want it? So, are you going to have electricity? I'm going to answer that for this conversation and say no electricity. To run power out to my greenhouse would cost me right around $1,000 to rent a ditch witch, dig it out, put the wire in, purchase the wire, and put it in. And that's before I get fixtures and anything else to go in it. So you can see why I'm trying to really focus on off-grid. And plus, if you can kind of get it going without electricity and stuff like that, then really you're in the right place. And it's not overly difficult, but there's multiple steps that we'll get into. So one is, obviously, how warm do you want it, which means what do you want to grow? If you want tomatoes and peppers, you need to be above 50. If you want to grow your normal fall, spring crops, you probably are going to be pretty good. If you're farther north, it gets a little bit more difficult. And when I say farther north, it's hard for me to give you a line. Like if you're in this state, be careful. But I would say the temperatures to look out for inside of your greenhouse is going to be somewhere in the range of like 23 to 20 degrees, somewhere in there in your greenhouse. So as it sits now, my greenhouse, if nothing's done to it, it will get to the same temperature as outside, but it will be very delayed, meaning that temperature won't really happen until the last minute. And then as soon as the sun comes, I'm going to use the term skyrocket, but it doesn't skyrocket, but it goes up. The temperature inside goes up much quicker than out in the normal. So we look at that and we say, well, what can we, you know, what can we expect from that? So if it gets down to it, you're still saving some of your plants because you're not getting frost damage. So it'll keep the frost off your plants, and it gives it a layer of protection. But then you go into it and you say, okay, well, now I want to raise the temperature. So there's all kinds of ways you can raise the temperature. And the first thing to do is you want to raise your base temperature and you want to monitor it. Okay. So that means you either need to get a thermometer to put in there, like an analog one, and you just go out and check it. The best way to do it, if you really want to be on point, is to get a digital thermometer that you can monitor like via your phone. You can go back and look at records. I've shown you guys mine many a times. It's a Govee. It's in the Amazon link. It should be at the bottom of this in the description. There'll be a link, so you can check that out. And I really like that because I can check it anywhere. I can check it, if I'm out of town, I can check it. If it's, I can sit right here and check it. So I know what it is, and I can go back and I can look over a period of time. So we want to raise that base temperature up, right? So it's all about insulation. Let me catch up on some hellos real quick before we get into insulation. Hey Frosty, hey Dan Lowe, and hey Brian. Everything is well here. So insulation, it can be a number of things. The polycarbonate does not offer any insulation. Glass offers more insulation, so there is that. I am going to exclude glass greenhouses out of this because of the cost, and really focus on the polycarbonate because they're more affordable, and that's more than likely what people are going to purchase. So when I first got mine, I went through a lot of ideas in my head, never really pulled the trigger on a number of them. Seen a lot of videos, watched the stuff, read a lot of blogs, I got a greenhouse gardening book. Absolutely didn't apply to anything for me. It was crazy. So, but I read all that stuff, and so I understood it. And what I learned was a greenhouse will raise and I hate this, but it raises your zone by 1 in the greenhouse. So take that for what it's worth. And what is a zone is an average low. So it'll raise your average low up by 1 typically. But again, these polycarbonate ones get cold. So what I do is I've got 2 15-gallon tanks. I painted them black and filled them up with water. They soak up the heat from the sun. And then at night, it slowly releases it back out and raises the temperature I'm averaging 4 degrees higher at night than outside in the middle of winter. So that's really important because now we have a base temperature of 4 degrees warmer than outside. So anything we do on top of that automatically is going to make a difference. So that changes everything. So we have that base set up, and now we want to use that to our advantage. So you can get these tanks anywhere. Go on Facebook Marketplace. The bigger the tank, the better, obviously. Didn't want to put 55-gallon drums in because then I would just have a greenhouse of water tanks, and I'm not trying to grow water. So, there is that option to do that. And now, since we've raised our base, we have multiple options. So we can add heat or we can retain heat. So retaining heat, in my opinion, is a little bit easier because you already build up that heat during the day, right? Right now, it's 81 degrees outside. It's 90 degrees in my greenhouse right now. It's in the shade. As of right now, it's in the shade. So we have extra heat. So what do we do to insulate it? There's a lot of different things you can do. The first thing is you seal the cracks. I got myself what I use is it's the trying to think of the name of it. It's the silicone. It's called Next, Next, clear silicone. And I went around and I just caulked all the way around the bottom, because where my greenhouse hit the base, I could see I'd go out there when it was raining and I could see water leaching in underneath, which means if water's coming in, guess what? Air is going out. So the first thing I did is I went around right when I put up my greenhouse, just before it got real dirty, and that, you know how things get. And I just went around and just cleaned the whole edge of the greenhouse, caulked the whole edge of it, inside and out. And so what that did is that eliminated an air gap of all of the perimeter of the entire greenhouse. So that's really important. And then I went around and did a whole lot of other things to it. I tested out some things like the door. There's a gap in the door when you shut it. So I put weather stripping in it. It didn't do a damn bit of good. It would have been nice, but it just didn't do anything. So, you know, if you look in my greenhouse, you can see the leftover glue where I got pissed and I ripped it down, and just kind of whipped it around and threw it. It's just kind of one of those things. And then the other part that's really obvious is the window that goes up and down. So it doesn't come in flush and set down. It kind of lays on top. So there's gaps there as well. So what I did is I went and I put the same weather stripping up around the gap. So when it came down, it would lay on it and it would compress it over time. And it did okay. I could probably do something a little bit more weather resistant, but I think there's just limitations. And that's something that we got to work with, is limitations. So the other thing I've seen people do with great success is they'll get like a bubble wrapping and they'll tape it up inside their greenhouse. I didn't do that because every morning I go in there and the entire inside of the greenhouse is soaking wet from the evaporation, the dew, and stuff like that. So that does work, but I just didn't want to deal with it. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't want to set up everything and then be having it fall and cut it, and just, it was a nightmare. But what I will say, and I do agree with, is the bubble wrapping, if you choose to use that method, which does work very well, is to get the bigger bubbles. Like, I mean, I've got some here. I've got a little piece. I don't have a big piece. But like big ones like this. You know what I mean? Like, it traps the air, it traps the heat, and keeps it in. So that's what you want to use. You don't want to use the little itty bitty teeny ones, because they don't, I mean, it'll help, but it just doesn't do a whole lot. So you can do that. The other thing you can do is you can, wherever the light does not come into the greenhouse. So, you know, the back wall of mine really doesn't let any sunlight in within, you know, any measurable sunlight. You can get some like insulation board and cut it and kind of put it in place. You could do something like that. And what that'll do is that'll block that back window. It'll block the light out of it, but that heat will, you know, stay in there. And it's just adding a little bit more. So the truth of the matter is, at this point, is the greenhouse itself, the polycarbonate greenhouses, are not good heat retention sources. Okay. They're very hard to get to retain that heat. So what we want to do is we want to trap it and we want to hold on to it as long as possible. But we need to understand that you're going to lose the heat, and it's going to be difficult to keep those temperatures up above 50 degrees. That's really going to be difficult. Now, adding heat is a totally different thing. So we talked about this a little bit on the last live. A lot of people were saying, like, I've done it, and if I have to, I'll do it again. But like, you could do something as simple, like I have a pathway in the middle of mine, and it's on there's rocks underneath it. So I could put a candle out there. And you don't think a candle would really do that much, but believe it or not, it'll let off a lot of heat, and it just kind of helps build that. It slows that release of heat down. You're not adding any heat to the water in the water tanks or anything like that, but you're kind of slowly, it'll build up. The problem is heat does what? It rises. So we have to understand that all that heat you build, especially at first, if you light a candle or something like that, is going to build up top. And if it can't get out, or it's slow to get out and the heat is generating faster than it can leach out of the system, then what you'll get is you'll now get the heat building up and then it'll funnel back down until that whole greenhouse goes. So if you can't trap that heat in or you can't slow down the release of the heat, there's your issue. So that is kind of a major contention point within the greenhouse. So what we want to do is we want to get the heat lower to the ground so that when you generate the heat, it's coming up through the plants first. That's the goal, right? A lot of people will, and this people like up north, they'll build a low tunnel within the greenhouse. It's basically a greenhouse within a greenhouse, and that helps too. So you already have one protection. You already have it a little bit warmer, and then you put the low tunnel inside on top of that, and now you have it even smaller. And then you take something, and let's just say another candle. You put a candle in there, then you're retaining the heat in a smaller area. That is, if you put the plastic on there, like you make the low tunnel, you're going to keep a lot of that heat in. So you can do that too. It's a big pain. It's something that I would do in an absolute emergency. And then I would do, if it was something I had to depend on, I probably would not focus on it. And by the way, I want to get into in a few, like the benefits of, like, let's say you can't keep it above that threshold that we talked about earlier. Then we'll talk about, the benefits of having one of these greenhouses anyways. Another thing you can do is you can get like Christmas lights, and they have to be incandescent bulbs because LEDs don't really generate a lot of heat. At this point, the only thing I know of is you can either dig in your attic and get some if you're old enough, or you can go to like Dollar Tree and get some. But again, now we're talking about electricity. So it's kind of difficult to do. You could do it off like battery packs and stuff like that, anything like that. But remember, it gets really moist in there. So another thing people do, and I see a comment just popped up, is making a compost pile within the greenhouse. So that generates heat as well. The issue is now I take a greenhouse. My greenhouse is 6x8. I have a 2-foot walkway inside. So basically I have 2-foot beds, 8 feet long on the sides. And then in the back, I think it's like a 3-foot by 2-foot bed in the back. So wherever I make that compost pile, because in order to generate the heat, you got to have a big compost pile, right? You need it tall, and you need it, probably, I would say at least 3x3 and probably 4 to 5 feet tall at that point. And you gotta work it. You got to continue to turn it and work it. You're not going to have much growing space. So what's the point in doing that? Like, and that's why I suggested in the last video, like if you're going to get a greenhouse, get the biggest one that you can possibly get, and then you're going to have room to play. So I don't have room to build a compost pile within my greenhouse. So that's kind of the issue there, but it will generate heat. It can do that. Another thing you can do is you can build sinks in it. So like a heat sink. And so what that does is you dig a hole, a trap, and then a lot of people line it with like rocks and stuff like that. And then the cold, because if heat rises, cold does what? It sinks. So as it sinks, it'll get trapped in these heat sinks. And then you have a pipe going underground outside of it that will push that cold air out into, because the cold air inside that sinks down is still 4 degrees warmer than outside. So when it comes out, what's it going to do out of that pipe? It's going to vent out of the greenhouse. So you're venting the cold air out. So that's an option. The rocks are an insulation source. And I haven't done this, and I'm not above doing it, but I kind of don't want to do it, is adding rocks to the water tanks, because it's another source of heat retention that can hold it even longer. So now that we've said that, let's think about retaining heat and how we can do it. So you ever go outside on an evening, a cold, as it's kind of warm during the day, and you go outside in the evening and you put your hand on the pavement and it's warm? Well, line the inside of your bed with some kind of stone. and then that stone will release the heat. Why did I use rocks in the middle of my greenhouse? Because it releases a little bit of heat. You may only be talking about, let's say for each addition outside of the water tanks, you're adding a quarter to a half a degree. Well, if you're at 20, now you're at 24 and a half. If you're at 25, you're at 30. So you're building all of these different mechanisms in order to do that. It doesn't have to be overly expensive, but we have to think about what is heat retentive. That's the really important part. What holds that heat longer and then releases it? Because it's not like when the sun goes down, the greenhouse just vents all the heat out and it just automatically goes down. That's not what it is. It's a very slow release. So you don't get that initial drop in temperature. I've showed you in the last live the graph for mine, and you can see how it'll go. And then eventually it'll drop down, and then the sun comes up and boom, it shoots right back up. And that's really the benefit of the greenhouse. There's there's people that use milk jugs, like plastic milk jugs, and they'll same thing, fill them up, get a cheap can of spray paint them black, and just put them in the corners. You know what I mean? Like there's a spot after growing in my greenhouse for a few years. There's a spot in there that doesn't get a lot of sun, that's difficult to grow in. And so like if I can't grow in it and it sits bare, then why don't I add a 5-gallon bucket, something like that. When I had 2 5-gallon buckets in the greenhouse, I was able to raise the entire temperature 1 degree. So if I add a 5-gallon bucket, I'm already getting 4. Now I've got 5. Then I got my stones. I'm getting 5.5. And you can see how it starts to build up. You put a low tunnel in there, you're raising it even more, another degree or 2. So now you're 7 degrees above your low outside. So it's a process, right? If you're going to build the heat sink, what a lot of people will do is they'll put a fan in it, and it'll kind of fan that air out. So you can do that to kind of evacuate it faster. I didn't do it because it just seemed like a lot of work. And honestly, when I knew I was getting the greenhouse, I went down, like I usually do, I went down a rabbit hole of research and just kind of figured that like it didn't matter. So yeah, so on cloudy days, Frosty says it doesn't do anything, and that's absolutely right. The worst thing you can get in the middle of winter is a cloudy day and a cold night, because then you don't really have any heat built up. That being said, clouds are an insulator for our planet. So if you have a cloudy day, what you'll notice is it's not as cold outside as it was when it was sunny, because that heat from the earth, it radiates from the earth, goes up, and then it hits the clouds, and then it gets trapped, right? You ever get a snowstorm? You know how you get a big bad snowstorm and it'll be 28 degrees, something like that, and then the snow clears out, the storm clears out in the next night, and then the temperature just plummets and it'll be like in the teens or single digits. That's because there's nothing holding the heat back. So it's a little bit, you get outside help as well sometimes. Let's see. Let me catch up on some of these comments. I've seen them rolling in. Hey, Chitza, am I saying that right? Well, welcome. Brian, I don't know if earth tubs, it may be the cold sink is what I'm thinking. Is it may be the same thing, just different terminology. So you can do that, Chitsa. You can also build the piping from your compost pile in, but you've really got to have an active compost pile. So just keep that in mind. And actually, what that can do, though, is it can provide a continuous airflow back into the pile so that you can continuously be feeding it. But you've got to keep maintaining that pile, because what happens is you'll get really warm temperatures from your greenhouse and then it'll plummet, because your compost will cook and then it'll kind of cool. And the process happens really fast. So you've got to continuously be doing it. But having that piping in there and having it like, and if you put some kind of like a fan or something like that, you can do it. Um, I use to cool my greenhouse. I use a solar powered fan, which does not have a battery. So when the sun's out, it runs. When it's not, it doesn't. And then that can help push that air to it too. So you can do that. So Frosty says his heat sinks don't really do much. I've heard mixed things about them, but the space that takes up is the issue. So Sparrow, your cement is retaining that heat and helping with that temperature. So you can't test what it would be without it. But if you add the water tanks in there, the water tanks are the biggest thing you can do. It's cheap, it's easy, and it's 100% like you don't do anything. You just keep the water tanks in there and they do their job. So Dave has the right idea here where he's going to dig down and put a foam barrier on under to help with that. That works too. I'm not really big on putting foreign objects into to it because you're just kind of eliminating your growing space. My whole theory is the plants, if they need to go down, they can grow down. So I'm not a really big fan of that, but that is absolutely an option. Yeah, Frosty, if you're not getting a couple hours of direct sun, then your greenhouse is probably in the wrong space. But I don't know how it grows. So the other thing too with the water tanks is I've got two 15 water gallon tanks and they sit about 3 feet high. Well, my greenhouse in the middle is about 7 feet tall, 6.5 feet tall roughly, but I still have room to go up. So remember, just like with gardening, vertical is your friend. So you can take those, like I can go out there, and if I really wanted to, and I don't know if I want to, but I might, and I could stack another tank on top. I could put a 5 gallon bucket on top. I could do a lot of different things. The other thing that we haven't talked about is your plants are actually helping insulate it as well and releasing heat at the same time. It's minuscule, but the more space that's clogged up with plants, the more that you have for that heat to get trapped up in those plants and actually help keep it warmer. And what we have to understand is we're not trying to keep the greenhouse warm, we're trying to keep the plants warm. That's all you care about is the plants. So think about that as you do this. Yeah, salt water does have better retention properties, Eddie. Thanks for coming, Eddie. That definitely is a thing. So you can add salt to the water. You can add sand to the water. You could put tanks of sand in there. You could fill those tanks up with sand, and they would retain the heat as well. Once you fill them up with sand, you're stuck with them there. That's why I didn't do them, because if I ever wanted to pull them out, all I gotta do is dump the water out. It's not a big deal. With the sand, I mean, you're talking, probably I think those 15-gallon tanks would probably be about 300 pounds. So the berry, and when I say 300 pounds, it's 200 to 300 pounds I cannot get out of the tank. So that's my issue with it. So I want to be able to move it, and even though I haven't moved it, you never know. Yeah, if you're not getting 6 hours, if you're getting 6 hours of direct sunlight, then you're retaining heat within those water tanks. So just think about that. Other like you could do stuff. Obviously, if you're not using electricity, we've got to think about what creates heat, and it's fire. It's fire. It's what took us into each stage of life has always been fire. So you could put a lantern out there. What is a great way, which it would create a lot of soot, so you'd have to clean the inside of your greenhouse. But a hurricane lamp, which is basically a oil lamp that has a big chimney on it, those make a lot of heat. So that would make a really big deal. But I would not do that all the time. I would not base my greenhouse survivability on adding fire. I would base that off of, holy crap, it's going to get cold for a couple nights. Let me do this to kind of keep it going. That's what I would base it on. Anybody who's starting plants, stuff like that, buckets of dirt, all your seedling trays and stuff, all of that retains heat, especially if you water it. Water retains heat, as we said. So if it gets really cold and you water your plants, you water your soil, it's going to retain that heat even more. So, it's why you hear like orange farmers and stuff like that. They'll spray the trees down and they'll water really deeply before they get cold, because that will hold the temperature down, the heat in, and then release it throughout the night, and even trap it if it ices over. So snow is an insulator. If you live somewhere that gets a lot of snow, you can build up the snow around your greenhouse, 2 feet high all the way around, 3 feet of snow. It's not an issue, especially you get out there with a shovel and you're creating insulation around your greenhouse. So there is that. The other thing you can do, if you really wanted to, is you could buy your polycarbonate greenhouse. You're going to get a bad cold snap. You can go out and you can get an actual like greenhouse plastic and then literally put it over the top and secure it. And then that's going to help trap that heat in even better. And what it does is when that plastic sheeting comes down over the side of the greenhouse, there'll be a gap, and that gap is your barrier, and then the heat will get trapped in there, and then that will help to keep it, from holding that heat in. So you can do a lot of things. Yeah, if they have a smokeless, odorless lamp, which I've yet to see, but if that's something, you can absolutely do that. Propane gas heaters, I mean, again, it's heat, it's fire, right? So anything that makes fire is in there. What I will say about is, one, it's going to be very expensive, and two, try to get something with a thermostat on it, or else it's going to be 80 degrees in there. And that temperature fluctuation, as we talked about in a previous video, is what's going to kill your plants faster than if you let it get cold as it is outside. So you go from 30 to 80 to 30 to 80 all in the same day. That's going to kill a plant. That'd kill me. What else could you? I mean, I've seen people put wood stoves in their greenhouses, but again, with these polycarbonate greenhouses, which is what we're focusing on, it's not really meant to cut holes in. Um, it's not meant to remove panels. It's kind of like once you build it, you got the structure. Now we've got to work around that barrier, because those panels are part of the structure that hold it together. So when you start looking at that, there's all these different things. It's really important to understand that you can't just start cutting stuff constantly. And there's people killing me on the voting. I can't wait for this election to be over. Any questions about heating a greenhouse? Any suggestions too? Because I don't know everything. I know what I'm comfortable doing and what I'm willing to do. I look at it and I say, look, I spent, I don't remember, probably at the time it was like $700 on the greenhouse. So I have a limit to what I'll put in it. So what do? I plant all cold hardy plants, frost hardy plants, and I don't really have an issue. Our frost is going to be delayed this year. Our last frost date is, our first frost date, excuse me, is like any day now. And we're not even close. For the next 10 days, we're going to be in the mid 60s at night. So we're really delayed in that, which is why I put those potatoes in there. But after that, we're probably going to turn and burn. We'll pull those potatoes out and we're going to put broccoli right back in its place. And we're going to start growing it. So it should work out good. Um, Now the benefit of it, you don't do any heat. You're gonna get too cold. You're still extending your season. Like you have low tunnels and then you have greenhouses, and it's in that order. Low tunnels are good, greenhouses are better. You're still going to extend your growing season by upwards of 2 months in the fall, and then in the spring you can start much earlier. And so what I choose to do with mine is I do start some seeds in it, but what I really use it for is to grow and harvest crops. That's why I have a greenhouse. I have my seed shelf over here, which is totally off, but you can see the edge of it right there. And so I don't need to have my greenhouse set up for anything else, for seed starting or anything like that. But I do use it to grow crops in and harvest from in the middle of winter. And it has every single year I've had it, it has our harvests have gone up because as things inevitably dwindle down and struggle outside, we always have that to fall back on. So it's become part of like what we do. It's part we depend on it now, which is good. That's what we want. That was the point of it. And I went into getting the greenhouse and I knew what I was going to do right away. I knew that I was going to have a greenhouse and I was going to grow crops in the ground, not in containers. And I knew that I was not going to be growing, frost tender plants in there. I knew I was going to be growing hardy plants and just extending it and taking that stress off. And so, for instance, my mustards and my lettuce, they don't die in there in the winter time. Even when it gets down to 23 degrees outside, they're still cruising right through. So, I can do that. And that's why we're going to start. I need to start broccoli seeds for the greenhouse within the next couple of weeks so that I can get them in when I pull those potatoes out. So a diesel heater would work. Yeah. If you want to spend that money. I hate the smell of diesel. I'm reading comments. Sorry. Not going to use fire for a main source of heat, only on cold nights and cold days. That's what I would do, Frosty. I mean, you see the forecast says it's going to be really cold. Boom, you hit it. And that's going to help build that up. So, Connie, the first low tunnel I ever had was one of those cheap pop-up low tunnels that had zippers, and they were the first thing that failed, and I started building my own. Literally the same thing. Don't have to worry about the zippers. Cheaper. It was the way to go. So, but yeah, I used one of those too. They were actually pretty good. Sheets. It's just the compost heating. That's all it is. That's okay. I hate it when people are like, "This is the such and such method." It's just a method. Planting inside of cinder blocks would work too, Jason. It's the same thing. And actually, that's not a bad idea. And I've heard that planting in cinder blocks is good because it's more acidic. So it kind of helps with the plants. But again, your plants are going to be wrapped around a heat. They're literally planted in a um, heat retentive material. So absolutely paint them black, but you also have to think in the daytime they're going to get hot. So be careful with that. But yeah, absolutely. Brian, the way I look at it is having a break is necessary, but in the winter, you get, in the period of winter, the greenhouse doesn't get a lot of pests and it's very, very low maintenance. It literally gets to a point where it's just go harvest. And so it's not that big a deal, but I do agree with you. Yeah, those greenhouses are not meant for tropicals at all. They're meant for like, warmer areas. Absolutely. You don't really get to freezing. Maybe you get to like 32, 33, something like that, 30 degrees. Then you can kind of limp them along, but it's not really meant for that at all. It's meant for, in my opinion, this is my fourth year with it. After I'm gonna call it my professional opinion. It's meant for cold hardy plants, and you really take a lot of this guesswork out about what we're doing. So it really does help. Yeah, Wayne, I think that would be a pretty good idea too. But for me, it wouldn't work great because the crops would be kind of shaded. So I need all the sun I can get. Is another limitation I had within my space. Yes, sparrow, brassicas, carrots. So the plants that I've had no problems growing in my greenhouse are radishes, turnips, rutabagas, lettuce. Cabbages get too big, but temperature wise, not an issue. Spinach did fine. Carrots did fine. Um, bok choys do really good in it. Mustard does really good. Kale does amazing. Never grew a collard in there because I don't need to, but that would work out well. What else? So far, the potatoes, but it's really not been cold enough to bother them. So I don't even know if we're going to be able to test out the cold in the greenhouse and the potatoes. I don't know, but what I do know is I'm probably going to start another round of potatoes in January in there to test it out. So, all of those do really good. And I mean, just in that statement, that's half your garden that you normally grow, right? Chard does good in there. I've done that. I'm not very successful with beets anyways, but beets would probably do pretty good. That's right, Jeff. Never stop. Keep growing. Keep growing. Any questions about heating a greenhouse? And if there's not, feel free to ask anything you want. Except don't ask me when you should start something because I can't tell you that. Seed starting season's coming up, so I'm probably going to be starting some seeds. I hate to say it, but like in a couple weeks, I'll probably start a small thing of seeds to put in my greenhouse. Yes, it is short day onion season. I'm not planting onions this year. I'm not doing it. I'm taking a break. I'm not. It's too awkward of a time. I say that, but it'd be a really good space for it, the greenhouse, because by the time it comes out, it'll be too hot in there to grow anything else, and then I don't have to worry about replanting in there. So I might have a couple. I might be doing some onions. You know what, Frosty? I'm gonna tell you the honest to God truth about growing onions. In my opinion, they don't taste any different than the store. I think it's good to grow them just so you know how to grow them, but it's not necessarily. Yeah, Danlo, because you correct me if I'm wrong, but you don't necessarily get really cold. You just don't get really warm. Is that correct? Bok choy. This is my third or fourth season growing them, and they are the easiest to grow. The absolute easiest to grow. They grow themselves. It's a shocker. I don't love them, but because it's so easy to grow and you can put so much in a small space, that it really does work out because it just adds a lot to our diet. Yeah, Frosty, I agree with you, but it's to me, it just doesn't really make that much of a difference. I mean, I guess really what it is if you go in and you have a different variety, that's where it changes. You know, varieties are king, especially for us growers. Oh man, these glasses are killing me, bro. I cannot get used to them. Yeah, you know, Dave, we I don't want to say it's going to be December here, but it's going to be a little while. Jeff, you're making me want to grow onions and I don't want to. It's not fair. Yeah, I've not Sparrow. I haven't done bunch of onions. I started them and then just kind of decided I didn't want them, so I got rid of them. So I actually, I don't know if I can share my screen with you. Let me see if I can get this signed in. I'll show you my initial garden plan for next year. I kind of finished it. Make sure it didn't close out. Yeah. Put away the pen and paper. Hold on one second. I'm signing into this app. Okay. Let's see here. Can you guys see that? Hey, Coastal. Laura, they come out at an odd time. It's just they come out when I can't plant anything else, and then they be honest, I grow too many and we don't eat enough of them, so that's kind of how it works. So here, this is the planter app that I use, and this is my so far. It's probably going to change 4 or 5 times before the summer, but this is my summer plan. So I've been working through it, and these are cover crops here. Can you see my mouse? No? Okay. So the bed with the flowers in the middle, the white flowers, that's all cover crop. And so there's actually a video coming out about the bed above it with the corn. Um, but all this stuff right here, and I wish you guys could see my mouse. Let me see if I can't figure that out. No. Oh well. So that's basically what we're doing, and I still need to fill in the greenhouse. So the greenhouse is the one in the middle with the stone in the center for the walkway. So we've got to do that, but that's what I've been working on. If you're interested, this is the Planter app. It's a sponsor of the Backyard Gardens podcast, the podcast that we have. And if you look at the link below, you'll get a discount on it. So it's definitely, I live by this thing. It's amazing just visually looking at it. So I'm trying to hammer down. You can see I've got a couple gaps in there. So I need to work that out. But otherwise, it's coming along. And I need to go back retrospectively and do spring. But I wanted to get this done first because it's the more complicated one for me. Jeff, we haven't had rain here in over a month. It's wreaking havoc on everything. Yeah, I used to have my book that I did sketches in, and I mean, I was ripping papers out, and it was ridiculous. You know, Dave, your weather is a lot like mine. You would be surprised. You probably don't, because if it's 40 degrees during the daytime, it'll still be 70 degrees in the greenhouse. We go out in the greenhouse in the middle of winter during the day. Just I'll go out there, I'll have a jacket on, I'll take it off, and I usually put like a coat hanger up, and I'll take it off and just sit in there and warm up. I bet you are, Danlo. But you know what? That's why y'all aren't getting a warmer winter than we are. So you can keep the rain. Actually, never mind. I want the rain. I'll take a cold winter. All right. So we knocked out heating a greenhouse. Do you guys want to stay on greenhouse for next live, or do you want to go on to something different? It's up to you. I don't decide. You know, Jeff, I've never planted intermediate day. I just wanted to go safe and do short days. Um, I like Vidalia onions, so that's kind of what we stuck with. Yeah, small log burner would work good, coastal gardens. Yeah, Connie, if I get, I don't know, I'm considering putting a small section in somewhere where I don't need to grow a lot, or certain things that I need to contain, and bunching onions would be one that would go in there, and mint would go in there too. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. Sorry, my phone's going off and there's nothing to see. So Jeff, you what variety of intermediate day onions did you grow? And that's the thing, like Coastal Gardens is doing a lot with their, I think you're referring to a greenhouse. There's a lot of things you can do that are individualized um to your garden. So that's really, the place that would be. You could do so many different things. Um and once like who was it earlier? Chitsa said that they were going to pipe in the heat from their compost pile. Once you start getting that heat in there and you notice it because you've got that thermometer that you're monitoring with, you can start to build on that. So really the biggest takeaway for me is start slow, start easy, and then start collecting data and seeing what you can do, because you more than likely already know what you can get away with outside. So it just becomes of, now that we're outside and we're getting away with it, how can we improve that on the inside? Bare minimum, it's going to make it easier. So I guess the question becomes, is it worth it to have a polycarbonate greenhouse? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. Yeah, I showed you guys the hottest temperature this year was 121 degrees in my greenhouse. Okay, so you're doing multiples, Jeff. You should start everything slow, man. You should never jump in, because you just don't know, you know. I mean, how many of you started with a small garden and it's grown to where it is now? Or did you start with the size garden you have now? And then the other question would be, did you start with a bigger garden and you've dwindled down because it's too much? That's the question. I should put it in a poll, but I'm not going to. But I am going to put another poll about the next live. So Troy went from small to large. Danlo went down. Brian started big and almost killed him. I don't know if I said this. I can't remember, but there's a poll about the next live. If you guys will help, it'll help dwindle down. Dave is getting bigger. Coastal's getting bigger. Connie's going smaller, but she grew. See, and that's the thing, is these incremental changes will happen. And instead of going in and saying, hey, I'm going to add 10 beds, add 1 or 2. And then you can say, hey, you know what? Let's stop here. So well, Jeff, that explains why you have such a big and amazing garden. You got a degree in agriculture. Good job. Yeah, Eddie, I try to go Wednesdays at 2:30, and I know it's not the most convenient for people, but for me, it works. It's, it is what it is. Ultimately, I would go on like Saturdays or something, but I got stuff to do, man, as we all do. Oh, so you're putting in fruit trees down low? I love that. Dave, but you get the structure built and then you can start utilizing it better. I mean, the thing is, it's your garden. You do what you want with it. If you want to have a garden full of walkways, go for it. At least you can move around in your garden. I don't have anywhere to walk because of that damn Seminole pumpkin. I'm ready for it to die. Yeah, Troy, I know what you mean. Before I did all this stuff, I was the same way. So now Frosty's going to remove his heat sinks. I would love to have a 1 acre garden. That's my goal, is 1 acre. I just want 1 acre, call it good. And then what I wouldn't, somebody asked me the other day if I'd sell the produce, and I would donate the produce to the food kitchens and stuff like that. That's what I would love to do, but I can't come across an acre at an affordable price. Yeah, I know I showed you guys my plan for next year, and part of my issue is my garden's grown to the point to where I almost don't know what I want to put in it because I don't want to have so much excess that I don't consume it. And, there's a point where people won't take it. So I kind of have an issue like filling the garden to this point, and a lot of things just become very repetitive. So I kind of think that for my personal garden, I'm where I need to be. Crockett, that's how you do it. You just the little drippings about it will help, and then you can make your decision later on. Don't rush into it. Figure out how to grow in your environment first, and then get your greenhouse. Don't get your greenhouse while you're still trying to figure out how to grow, because it's going to throw you all in a mix, and you're going to be really confused. Yeah, Sparrow, that would be cool. I mean, the other aspect that I had thought about is like making like an honor system thing and having, I mean, clearly it's going to cost money. So like a donation box to help. And people would donate if they could, but if they can't, like I'm not trying, um, you know, it's very late in the live to talk about this, but the food deserts and food swamps and stuff like that are a major issue. And there is a lot of cold truth behind growing food in these areas, and providing that food is a very good thing, but it's more important to get people involved and understand what a garden can produce, what one 4x8 bed can produce. In the spring, if we take all of our different rows from all of our beds and we were to combine them into beds, 2 4x8 beds feeds my family completely, almost 100% for our vegetable intake in the spring. That's not a lot of space. That's a good goal, Aaron. I respect that. Yeah, is it bear? Like bear? Yeah, definitely get a greenhouse. I mean, like I said, I don't remember who I was saying, but just make sure you understand how things are growing outside of a greenhouse before you go inside. And I mean, even using a low tunnel can help. So the same things apply for a low tunnel, just on a smaller scale. Dude, we should definitely, Jeff, you're right. You're right, Jeff. But people want to continue talking about greenhouses, but I want to talk about seeds. I'm going to end that poll. I'm going to throw it in the mix because Jeff is right. I love talking about seeds too. Yeah, Connie, it's hard to tree roots are a bitch. I mean, that's just all there is to it. They're a pain in the ass. That's part of the problem with what we call the wild garden. Um, it's the tree roots are just insane. Okay, everybody wants to talk about seeds. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll take a break from greenhouses and we'll talk about seeds because people are voting for seeds like 100% rate. So um, I'm just going to end that one. Now, on the subject of seeds, though, what do you want to talk? So I'm already doing a seed starting series that's going to be comprehensive. If you're following along, every week I'm releasing a video about seed starting to some extent. And did I do one this week? I don't remember. I think I have to still film one for this week. Uh-oh. So what do you guys want to talk? Like, throw the suggestions out here, and then we can gear it. I don't really want to do one about how to start seeds. That's not productive. Seeds in a greenhouse. There's one. Yeah, I've never grown morning glories, Dan Lowe, because I always thought that I've always heard they get very invasive. Dave, I use 144 seed cells for some things. I use 72s. To be honest, I'm not really interested in going below 72 because of the space constraints. The 72s work really well. No problem, Frosty. I hope you have a good day. I know you had to go. So we'll talk about cold stratification. I'm going to do a video on it as well, but this is not, I view you guys as like the core audience that show up to these. So you'll get a preview. And then when I start doing it, I'll show it on camera. But we'll start talking about cold stratification, and what that really refers to is just to kind of, if you don't know what it is, it's seeds that require cold in order to start. So there's a lot of flowers and stuff like that, trees that just, they have to get cold and have that period of cold to start. So that's something that we can do. We'll talk about cold stratification. Let me write it down. To be honest, I sat down to schedule this and forgot what it was all about. What's the next week's date? It'll be in November. That's gross. And for Brian, we can also factor in the greenhouse too, because that's a really good way to start seeds. No electricity, cold stratification works out really good. Danlo, I don't like Thanksgiving. Take care, Dave. Have a good one. Yeah. So we're gonna stop this now. People are starting to filter out. So we'll do cold stratification, and that will include using the greenhouse. Yeah, we can't be friends. I lived in Plymouth, Massachusetts for a number of years, and Thanksgiving was not a welcome holiday there, believe it or not. So yeah. But we'll do cold stratification, and then think about what you guys want to do for the one after that, and we'll just continue down this path. Hopefully we'll make some real seed starters out of this situation. So I've got a video coming up about my new idea for my corn bed. If I get it edited, it'll be out tomorrow. So we'll see how this idea works. It's kind of loopy, but we'll see. I'm definitely going to do it. And then I've got to do something about, I got to see what seeds I'm going to start and how we can do about that. But everybody have a good week. We will see you guys later on. And next Wednesday at 2:30, we'll be here. So bye now.